This is Solid Snake, and you're listening to This Week in Geek with Mike the Birdman Dodd and the rest of the Twig crew on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geeks, the Prototype, and I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd, but I'm not alone as we join you in this really weird-ass news cycle. I am joined with my fellow compatriot in self-isolation.
Alex.
That's right.
Unwanted self-isolation.
Exactly. This was supposed to be a week of gathering and fun and social togetherness, but instead, no. We're not going to do that. Yes, we are going to be doing the next couple of weeks and months or longer. We'll see how this all breaks down. Getting things done here at This Week in Geek. So we decided, hey, what better time to record a prototype? Because there is no lack of things to talk about in the news right now. It just happens to work out with what's going on. So let's kind of break things down. So in this edition of the prototype, it's going to be a shorter show than normal. But we're going to talk about, we did talk about this on our weekly show this past week, and we promised we'd talk about it more, and that's about the other big elephant in the room when it comes to geekery, and that would be E3 2020 has been canceled, and that has been due to the concerns surrounding coronavirus. The ESA made several statements alluding to the health and safety of its employers, employees, exhibitors, and guests, concerning COVID-19. Very smartly, they have decided to postpone the event, and that affects everybody. And this news broke on Twitter more or less because of Devolver Digital, I would say. It's not unfair to say that. They're like, cancel y'all's E3 hotels and flights. And then Ars Technica picked up the story, and then they updated it while speaking directly to certain ESA members who shall remain anonymous. And then the news was confirmed the following day that E3 2020 was indeed canceled, which doesn't come as a big surprise. E3 2019 certainly had its own degree of shit showery, from weird attendance numbers to the leaking of people's personal information by inadvertently doxing them. And it just wasn't a good time all around. Plus, E3 2020 was going to be shifting more towards more of a PAX-like environment, where we're supposed to be an arts and entertainment expo with influencers and all this thing. So it was going to be a little less trade show, a little bit more carnival, I guess would be how I would describe it. A little less professional than I would prefer. But then again, to break down the barriers between the every person and the gaming industry, I guess it's a good thing. But I do prefer trade shows to be just that, for journalists and influencers and journalists of note, to get out there and get the stories out to their particular audiences. Is that me? Is that me gatekeeping? Maybe that's a little bit of old school media in me. I don't know. I don't want to be a douchebag, but such as it is. But things have changed in the media landscape. PlayStation skipped out on last year's event. They're going to skip out on this year's, which is a pretty big deal considering the PlayStation 5 is just on the horizon, though I wonder what's going to happen now. The Xbox Series X is also going to be, was going to be at E3 at the Microsoft Theater, which is just across the street. And Nintendo, continuing its minimal floor presence at E3, is going to continue on with its Nintendo Directs as it has for several years, to much success, and a lot of platforms are moving towards doing digital anyway. So we're going to talk about what does this mean without an E3 this year for the first time in many years, and after the debacle that I want to say was in the early 2000s, where they moved it around and you had to go to different venues to see different events. It was really stupid. And we don't have Mr. Coffee for a change, which is nice. It's an uncertain landscape, but I think it's a landscape of, do we even need E3 anymore, especially in the era of YouTube, Twitch, and other digital platforms?
Yeah, it's been interesting because there were events that we were scheduled to be at that just, up in smoke at the last second. I think we need to have time set aside for a lot of these releases. It's one thing to have them sprinkled throughout the year, but it does help build hype and put eyes, on screens at least, when you have a set date like the first week in June or something. If you set that as, I don't know, Digital Gaming Week or Gaming News Week, if it's not E3, just having something come out, at a specific time where they all start releasing these news articles, it helps, people like us in the media, but it also helps, especially, honestly, like the target market of kids and college kids that, are just out of school that like to look forward to, what's coming. They start their summer off basically by watching E3 coverage, or traditionally did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I remember when E3 was streamed on G4 Tech TV, and it was essentially event viewing. Like you had to watch it, and then it was on Spike TV, if I remember correctly. Either way, there was extensive coverage of E3, and it would even permeate other stuff in the Canadian media with the Electric Playground. Whenever they would do reviews on the run and stuff like that, you'd get some sort of an E3 special or updates from the floor every day. And with things changing so much, especially now, we live in such a connected environment. You can live stream. People were live streaming from E3, so you didn't need TV there. Though, speaking of live streaming from E3, don't bring a live camera into a bathroom, as Dr. Disrespect learned.
There's certain things where I almost feel like people like that don't always use
think ahead.
It's not just that, even it's the best way to put it. You don't have to be overly intelligent or emotionally and cognitively mature about your surroundings to become famous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can be an intelligent person but not understand etiquette and what should and shouldn't be done. It's not that everything should be censored, but there's the thought should enter your mind that what I'm doing is illegal, and you should understand the laws around you.
Yeah, pretty much. AKA don't be stupid. So yeah, I mean, looking at things now in the year 2020, I don't think E3 needs to exist anymore. And I say that because I think this year companies are going to look at their sheets they're going to look at their books. They're going to look at how much they paid for booth space, for travel expenses, and that's including food, lodging, other incidentals. You have to pay for electricity at E3 in addition to floor space. They're going to look at all these things when you could pay a boutique marketing firm or a boutique PR firm to put together your presentation, a couple of slick videos, maybe a couple of asset packages. You're hiring a team for maybe a month to put all this together, to send out to a curated press list you've already bought and paid for, or you already have relationships with these journalists anyway, and your work is done. And maybe you engage them. They can set up appointments with developers over Discord, and you have a revolving door, and they work from home in a controlled environment, and you just have a person listen in on the call. Many times on Twig, we've done interviews where I'm doing the interview itself, I'm recording it, but there's a PR person listening in, and they can jump in at any time. So this allows a more controlled bit of the message, whereas on the E3 floor, ultimately almost all the audio that's gotten at E3 is garbage. It's going to sound better from a technical standpoint, but you're controlling what you want out there. There's no accidental quote unquote E3 leaks. I'm wondering how many of those were actually accidental, but whatever. This prevents flubbing for one. And I think it's a better use of the digital space, because it's not like YouTube charges you. Plus, they can buy advertisements, because right now, so many people are going to be watching YouTube to kill the time. So you want to hype up your games, you want to hype up your announcements for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, you start buying that ad space now. Like, one of the big things that was going to be announced this year, Warner Brothers was going to have a pretty big announcement with a new Batman game, a long-rumored Harry Potter game, and several other IPs were going to get announced. Now, I guarantee you the Warner Brothers Interactive development team is likely building their digital assets package. Sure, you're not going to get a lot of hands-on time now, but we'll still see trailers. We'll still see gameplay. My guess is they'll invite the big people from like Kotaku, some of the major print articles, print publications, and whoever else, people like Angry Joe, I guess. Like they'll invite people that matter, for lack of a better phrase, on that front to come out and play this. So you're still going to get the same coverage. In essence, it's going to cost them a lot less. It's going to cost them a lot less to pay for a couple of flights and a hotel for a couple of journalists than it is to rent out this huge ass booth space for 3 or 5 days. I think it's going to work out better for their books, and they're going to realize E3 ain't fucking worth it.
Well, and this is the thing. A lot of them, have been checking their checkbooks, for lack of a better term, right? And making sure that they are tighter. But like you said, if it costs, let's say $2 to $5 million to put a booth on and plan for this week, like the regular E3 weekend, that $2 to $5 million can be used for, like sending the media, sending us, like, here, would you guys like to check out the system? Even if it's not like to keep, it can go into a fund where they send out basically preview units of the new consoles to the media to try, and or give away or whatever. But like, if it's $3 million, think about that. Like when the system launches or before launch, they could give out 1,000 systems to the media.
Yeah, because I remember when the new Xbox launched, or the new Xbox 360 and even the Xbox One, if you were sitting in the Xbox theater, you walked out with a new Xbox.
So think about that. They could expand that to 2 or 3 times that, because they're not having to actually run the theater or run the whole weekend event.
Yeah, like it would not surprise me. I mean, I've got a pretty good relationship with Microsoft. I'm hoping against hope I get a new console this year, because we've been pretty consistent with our review coverage with them over the last decade or so.
And same with Sony. It would be interesting to see, because that's the kind of thing that they used to give out to a lot of people. And then in the last console generation, you notice that they pulled back on that because they were putting on so many big, large events, and like they were pushing it to mainstream media. But now mainstream media isn't the same. Mainstream media is YouTube. Mainstream media is Twitch. Mainstream media is podcasts. So that money, like instead of like 3 or 4 tentpole events, they could go, here's 1,000 different people that can basically do our marketing for us by giving it out to the press.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a much smarter distribution of that money, to hit as many big and small outlets as you possibly can, rather than putting on a big extravagant show with like finger foods, which are just going to get contaminated from people not washing their nasty ass hands. I mean, sure, it's one thing to have booth babes and swag. What's the unintentional casualty of this? There's going to be warehouses of just E3 swag sitting around right now, because that shit has been made for 6 months.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of our press contacts are like, hey, would you like a package of like merch that we can't get rid of? And that's probably going to start showing up at all it'll be YouTubers first, and then it'll trickle down to traditional media and radio and podcasting.
Yeah, because like I used to get little E3 care packages from some of our friends from like Capcom and Namco and EA way back in the day. It's been a little less in the last few years as the shift has focused towards larger influencers, as traditional media has kind of shrunk, because it's still being covered in radio and TV. But as you said, it's now Twitch, it's YouTube, it's podcasts. So people are being forced to adapt too. And Nintendo, despite being behind the curve when it comes to online functionality and understanding how its social spaces work, they decimated everybody by being ahead of the game when it came to its Nintendo Directs. They put them on once a quarter, maybe twice if they do an indie showcase. and they do something for the fans or the stakeholders of their console all the time. They're constantly updating. Like, here's a Smash Direct, here's a Pokemon Direct, here's an indie showcase, here's something. So you're constantly informed. There's always Nintendo news in the news when it's appropriate. And when E3 happens, they give us a deluge of information that keeps people talking for weeks. Nintendo knows how to do it right. When you watch the Microsoft press conference, it's interesting for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. You see some cool trailers, you break those down. There was always the long talks that Jeff Keighley used to host with different developers breaking it down. And sometimes you get some info, sometimes you wouldn't. It would vastly depend on the flow and ebb of the conversation. And ultimately, a lot of the press conferences were really forgettable. There'd be one or two really banging trailers, the ones we've come to expect, like, oh, there's the new Call of Duty, there's the new Madden, there's, the next Assassin's Creed this year or whatever. And Nintendo never suffered from burnout. From Activision, from PlayStation, from EA to Ubisoft, we always had an idea of what to expect. But Nintendo constantly defied expectations. Now, they have an amazing digital marketing team. They have somebody amazing ahead as their head of digital PR and marketing. Like, this person deserves some sort of industry award. I don't know what that award would be, but I'm sure one exists. And moving forward, other companies are going to have to take this approach. I think when Sony did their State of Play back earlier on in, I want to say it was February, and we saw Resident Evil 3 officially get dated for April and Final Fantasy 7 get dated, people were really fucking excited. That's something to learn from. And that was only 15 minutes, if I remember right, maybe 20. It was short.
Yeah. It was short. It was there. It wasn't great, but it was a good start. Not to mention, like, people have been clamoring for Nintendo to have a new Direct, a full-fledged one. I believe they just announced an Indie Direct, which is weird. Like, they don't have another Direct set. It's almost like they're hedging their bets because they're not sure, what's happening with all the, the international coronavirus stuff. So we might not get a full-fledged Direct for another month or two.
Yeah, like, we'll see something ready by June, because I guarantee you people are working overtime from home right now to put together something. There's going to be something that first 2 weeks of June, guaranteed. There's going to be a digital E3 happening. It's not going to be traditional. If the teams work hard and smart, which they can, there will be traditional Microsoft press conferences held on the Monday of E3 at 3 p.m. Eastern time. It'll happen. Sony will do a State of Play. If they're smart, they'll get out ahead of the game and do it on the Saturday. So they beat Microsoft. They beat EA. They're ahead of the game. They're like, hey, guys, PlayStation 5. Bang. Which that brings me to my next point. Some of the rumors I've heard concerning Sony. So this comes from a questionable source, but sometimes these guys are right. 4chan. So a 4chan user had said they work for Konami, and a big rumor floating around right now is that Sony may be buying up Konami IPs, such as Castlevania, Silent Hill, and Metal Gear, to make them exclusive PlayStation 5 titles. That would be fucking huge. And one of the other big things is they want to start developing, potentially remaking Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2 Solid Snake, and then keeping the rest of the stuff in canon, because the other two games are problematic at best, and my voice is going out. Sorry.
I can hear you sounded like a fading star.
Yeah, it was really weird. That just kind of came out of nowhere.
I'll talk while you regain your composure. Now,
have a drink now.
I was going into this on Discord with people. There's the three franchises they're going for are obviously the ones that had the largest potential sales appeal, but there's a few properties that are being left out. So this isn't a case of we're like, oh, are they buying Konami? No. Konami makes way too much money from their pachinko machines and gambling products around the world. And that's where they've basically shifted their focus for years. because they don't know how to treat their employees well. And that's not a jab at them. You've seen all the articles for the last multiple years. They are probably the worst game developer to have worked for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Like to the point where they were detrimental to their employees' health. Which, we saw what happened with Kojima. So the properties, though, when you think about it, it's not just like the Castlevania series, the Silent Hill, and Metal Gear. They haven't mentioned anything about purchasing the smaller properties or what used to be larger properties, but I would suspect if they're buying the large IPs, they may as well go and try to clean them out of some of their medium ones. If I were Sony, it would be a smart move to buy up Contra. It would also be a smart move to buy up what's it called, Bomberman, and potentially pick up something like the old, like, because Konami owns the old Hudson licenses and everything, and like the old
Adventure Island and stuff like that.
Yeah, all that stuff.
I thought that was Namco for some reason.
Yeah, see, a lot of people get that confused, but when NEC and Hudson sort of went out, all the stuff was picked up by Konami. So pick up Bomberman, pick up Contra, and pick up Sony's always liking to expand their RPG repertoire. Pick up Suikoden series. It's been,
I think Namco is still Namco. I'm almost certain of that.
With what? Sorry.
Namco owns Bomberman still.
Nope. Look up any of the releases on the Switch. Anything else? It's Konami.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah, because it's going to be on Bomberman is going to be on the TurboGrafx system, and it's only like first party titles basically going on there for the most part. But yeah, they own them. That's their big. But see, that's the thing. People forget they even own it because they come up with a game every like 5 years and nobody plays it because they don't really put a lot of effort into it. So it would be interesting if they picked up that license. A few things that, because Sony has talked in the past about there might be considering doing some cross platform stuff, like some stuff showing up on Nintendo platforms. The best ones to go on the platforms would be Contra, which we saw how bad Konami handled their last release.
Yeah.
And the Bomberman, why am I drawing a blank on the name? The Bomberman that came out like as a launch title on the Switch, that was Konami as well. Now that could be used better, especially since it's a property that's been on multiple platforms before. But Suikoden was one of the best RPGs franchises on the PlayStation. They were exclusive to PlayStation properties, and they were created and published by Konami. It was their premier RPG series, and then they just dropped it completely around 2008 or 2009. So it would seem like if Sony wants to compete in the international market and really try to drive home that they're the home for exclusives, because remember the last 2 years, how many exclusive studios were bought and exclusive titles were announced for the Microsoft platform. It was like a bazillion last year and the year before.
Yeah.
There was like 30 studios, like 60 exclusives, all that crazy stuff. Well, this is a company that and a bunch of licenses and properties that you would not have expected Sony to be going after, anybody to go after, because you always thought of Konami as big, or Konami as like almost like patent hoards. They would hold on to all their stuff even if they didn't do anything with it. But this would be a get that if Sony picked up the Konami library, that's a pretty significant boost to the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, I think if Sony could inject some life into these IPs, which people still love Castlevania. The name is still revered today. We still get Metroidvanias. I know that Bloodstained Ritual of the Night did really well. People love that. If you got Silent Hills, especially you saw how stupid popular PT was, there were people still selling PlayStation 4s that had the PT demo on it.
And Bloodstained, was created by the former creator that worked on a lot of the Castlevania stuff that left the company over, major disputes with how the management was run. Well, they could bring him back into the fold working for Sony, or if they own the properties, be like, okay, you didn't like working for Konami. Would you like to, freelance, have your studio, which is independent, work on the next Castlevania, 3 trilogies or whatever. And, it's owned by Sony, but you get full creative freedom to make the game how you want autonomously.
Yeah, and if they could somehow get Kojima Productions back, because Sony does have a good relationship with him with Death Stranding.
Whether or not they create a new studio and have him be the head of it, or if they just for the sake of, because I feel like Kojima probably doesn't want to work for a giant company on his own anymore. He wants to do freelance or do contract work. Have him come back to work on the Metal Gear series. It'll be a Kojima Productions production, but the game would be wholly owned by Sony. But he would get creative freedom to do whatever he wants, and that's sort of the get up they've had with Death Stranding. He got to do whatever he wanted. It became whether or not it was like the critical marvel that everybody thought it might be, it ended up being probably the most talked about game of last year.
Yeah, I mean, despite what you may think of it, I still haven't played it. So I guess where do the other companies go from here? Like, obviously we know Nintendo, they're gonna be fine. Sony, they've got their state of play, they're gonna be fine. Microsoft, what do they do to stand out, and what do the other publishers do?
Well, I can talk about we'll talk about Microsoft because they had some big announcements today. But as far as other publishers go, there's been a rumored Sega Direct for the last month or two that they were going to do a digital platform, like a digital thing to release for Sonic, to talk about Sonic, but also other properties. And people were wondering that they said it was like hardware opportunities and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Genesis sold well enough, not like gangbusters, but if it sold well enough to give them an idea to do some other hardware partnerships, like if we might get, I don't know, like a Saturn or a Dreamcast portable or mini or something. Or if it means that they're going to start releasing some of their older titles remastered, or maybe enter a strategic partnership with a major company. Like it would be interesting if we heard that, oh, by the way, Sonic Team and Sonic properties moving forward are going to be exclusive to Nintendo or exclusive to Sony. I can't see them doing with Microsoft.
No.
But Nintendo would be weird if they did completely exclusive with them, because other than the Sonic Olympic games, they don't do exclusives with Nintendo. But I could see, if Sony is on this buying spree to prepare for the next generation, not that they would sell their entire division, but if they said, oh, by the way, we have a 5-year exclusive deal for all Sega titles. Yeah,
I mean, I think that would be something for them to definitely do. I mean, for sure. And
Ubisoft and other people, like Ubisoft has had a rough last year. I feel that whatever presentation they're going to do, they're going to take some time. And when we do see what comes this year, because they're still saying we got 5 titles this year coming, major titles, right? And we've seen none, no word on any of them.
I think there was something. I think Gods and Monsters are supposed to be some pretty big news.
Yeah, but there hasn't been anything. That was going to be like a holiday game. Remember how wasn't Legion pushed back indefinitely?
Which one was that one?
That was why am I drawing a blank on it? The one where you're hacking.
Honor looking game?
No, the one where you're hacking into people and everything. It's the franchise game. Oh, why am I drawing a blank? People are going to be yelling at their phones.
For Honor?
No, it's the one where you're hacking people and you get to play as an old lady.
Oh, Watch Dogs Legion.
Yes, Watch Dogs. That's what was on the tip of my tongue. That was supposed to be out already.
Yeah, I heard it got pushed to the summer, but we haven't heard anything more about it since.
It's been indefinite. I wouldn't be surprised if they say they got 5 games coming. What if they all come like end of summer and holiday season, and we're looking at like 3, maybe they push 2 back farther and we have 3 multi-generational launch titles.
I think that would cannibalize sales. I think if they did 2 big games,
it would be Watch Dogs and the Gods and Monsters probably. But I don't know. I could see
maybe
Watch
Rainbow
Dogs.
Six Quarantine.
Yeah, but because it's not as big of a title. Honestly, it's a big title, but it's not like their bread and butter has been the Rainbow Six Siege, still going. But Quarantine supposed to be a full storied game, not just a.
I think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
They haven't shown enough on that. That might get pushed to next year. but Legion was like supposedly like 80% done when it was, when they announced the pushback. So I could see that being one that they end up making making it a launch title, like a multi-generation title. And the Gods and Monsters, that's likely a holiday, because that's one, as far as I know, was still on track. They never actually announced a pushback on that. But the other titles, there's going to be an Assassin's Creed announcement or something to that matter. Are we in a tick or a talk period right now with Far Cry? I think we're in a talk. Like there might be
something teased anyway.
Yeah, there might be something teased as far as. Oh no, I think they got rid of the TikTok thing, so they might be extending it or making some.
There'll be
changes.
another Just Dance, because why the hell not?
Oh yeah, and please come out on the Wii. Please come out on the Wii, because it'd be amazing. Yeah, because it's just updating the roster of the songs and everything. Now, as far as Bethesda has a lot to lose if they have to do a direct. Like they can't just rely on the canned laughter of paid audience members. So there's that. I don't know how well Doom's going to do. That's the thing. Like,
I think Doom Eternal's going to do fine. I think what's going to be interesting for them is they're going to have to wait and see how well Wastelanders for Fallout 76, because that releases in April. So that'll be big. Why
are they bothering? Like that game's dead.
Not really. I follow the community rather closely, and the game does still have a fairly active user base. This is adding more traditional Fallout elements into it, where it becomes a single player.
Isn't the user base toxic though? That's all the news has been saying about how people hate playing.
It depends on where you go. Most people are actually remarkably helpful. The subreddit does have its own problems, but most people will help you out. There's not a lot of griefing anymore. There was a period last year where there was kind of class warfare, where there was between the people who have Fallout first and the people that don't. This will be another telling year for Fallout 76 to see what they have coming for a year.
Well,
is this year 2 or 3?
This is year. We'll be partway through year 2.
Yeah, so this will be a big year because they like the battle royale mode.
Well, wasn't it the paid private server thing? Wasn't that just an unmitigated disaster?
It was at first. It works now. Okay. I don't know how popular it is because it was deleting people's stashes, but now Bethesda can just restore accounts.
Bethesda has one game basically for the year of new games. Like they might have more, but they haven't been dated. So
I wouldn't surprise me if there's a Fallout announcement of some kind, because people have been saying for years we're going to get a Fallout 3 remaster. I think if Bethesda needs to pull it out of their ass, now's the time.
I wouldn't be surprised if we got like a full remaster in a new game engine of Morrowind and Oblivion. I could see them.
That's a little more complicated than you might think.
I know, but
of all the complicated scripting.
Well, no, I mean, I literally like a refresh on it, or an announcement that they're going to be, they wouldn't want to do the first 2 games in the series because they're they're not just old and dated. Like they weren't really scripted that much. It was more of a random dungeon generation sort of thing. But I could see them going, okay, what can we do to appease fans to get not a quick buck, but like, get people back into it while they wait for the next Elder Scrolls game, and announcing a remaster or an HD remake or, a 4K remake of either of those titles might be worth it. Now, do you think we're going to see? Didn't they announce that? Was it a time travel based one with the?
Oh, the weird Japanese one.
No, not that one. The one where it was like the.
Oh, the weird cyberpunky one.
The 1970s looking thing with like the black dude in the bar with a gun, and was it Deathbound or something where they kept repeating time over and over again? That looked interesting, but hasn't been any word on it since. Now, do you think we'll get any Wolfenstein stuff? Any news on that?
Probably not. I think that franchise will be put to bed for a while.
Like the only thing I could think of would be
Youngblood did okay, but it didn't do great.
Yeah, like what I could see them doing is releasing Wolfenstein 1 to the expansion for 1, or was the extra game Old Blood or whatever. Releasing a pack. Youngblood. No, the old something or other. There was the first game, then there was the expansion.
The old world or something.
Yeah. And then there was the second game, and then there was this expansion, the TikTok that they do. I could see them for new generation, like in the fall, saying, hey, by the way, we're going to release a bundle pack, because they did that with 1 and 2 already. Say a bundle pack, you're going to get all 4 games, and they're 4K Ultra on Xbox Series X and PS5. I could see them doing that as a holiday bundle to get some sales, because they can charge $80 if you get 4 games and it plays in full 4K. And those engines are optimized to play in 4K anyway.
Yeah.
But as far as any other major ones, who knows what EA is going to do? We know roughly we're going to have sports titles, and they're going to really push how realistic their sports titles are in this generation coming up. And we know Activision is going to do something with COD, probably to show off new features. But as far as other major companies and how they're handling everything, Square Enix will be interesting to see what they do. But they've done their presentation was one of the better ones at E3 last year. And then Devolver will still probably do their normal thing. It would be hilarious if Devolver does the regular, the crazy show they do in front of the fake canned laughter audience, where it's like stock footage. If the stock footage is just an empty room and they just pretend that there's people there, and they're like, yes, and you get a prize, and you get a prize, like they were doing before, but then there's nobody in the audience and it's all crickets the whole time. I could see them doing that now, or see them, not making light or making of the situation, but I could see them basically, they've always done subversive humor, doing it in such a way that it's not offensive to people, but it's like run the promo, run the event like they would normally do, just to a blank audience. And that would be just enough of their wit and humor, because their stuff is usually like gory, over the top, ridiculous. So they'll do something like that. And then getting into the big thing is, this morning, as of recording, Microsoft released all of the info on the Xbox Series X. And I mean all the info, like full teardown, full details on everything. And if you want, I can get into that, because I know you weren't watching. Sure. You were watching the news on our borders being closed.
Yeah.
So getting into how Microsoft is doing things, they are releasing information strategically through large, presence YouTubers. Like Digital Foundry is the one that got the scoop on the full teardown and of the Xbox Series X. And they're probably, as far as you want, like technical numbers, specs, how things work, from a very detailed perspective, they're basically the top tier. They're the kind of quality you would expect from like an actual tech TV show, not a YouTube show. So they got to go to the headquarters and check it out. So I'll summarize some of it, and we'll link in the description of the show to some of the official specs on it. But it's still 12 point something teraflops, all the stuff that they had already said. But it's the big deal here is it's 16 gigs of RAM, which they split the RAM up into 2 sections, one with faster RAM specifically for video, and one with RAM that's still really fast, but it can be used for the rest of the system. 2.5 gigs is reserved for the operating system. The rest can be used by the CPU and audio, and then the larger portion of the RAM, I think it's about 6 gigs, is reserved for just video stuff, which is more RAM that is already in the current Xbox One X, is just video. So they also have a built-in hardware accelerated audio solution where it automatically detects, like it tells you how many speakers you have in your house. It detects where the audio is and offloads it from the CPU. So they're down to like 1% CPU utilization just for audio. So they're trying to optimize everything so that the CPU is basically used just for complex computations. So what does that mean in real world? It means if you have headphones on, very realistic stereo audio, if you have surround sound and you have like a good setup, you'll be able to hear footsteps from whatever direct angle it is away from you, and you'll be able to know exactly where you are in the world. Now, they did announce the hard drive is a removable hard drive.
Ooh.
It's so, you remember that port that we saw on the back of the mock-up where it looked like a square and it looked like a slot you put something in?
Yeah.
It is. That's where the hard drive goes. It is a portable NVMe solid-state drive with a custom case enclosure for cooling, bandwidth at in the NVMe PCI Express 4th gen speeds. So you're talking 4 gigabytes per second, not gigabit, gigabytes. That is basically an entire like Blu-ray movie's worth in 1 second of speed.
Jesus.
If like for instance, it's unprecedented, and they've also developed a brand new algorithm. They built the input-output operations. Like most hard drives and the way the input-output works for operating systems has not changed in 30 years. That's why, Windows drives are like the operating system file systems and everything, and how the physical input-output is on the motherboards have not really changed much in 30 years. Well, they've actually changed it now. They built the input-output algorithms and the actual traces and the hardware from the ground up. So when it connects, they can actually use, let's say your game is like very complex with what it's going to need to use store in RAM. It can actually use that hard drive because it's so fast as extra storage for RAM. So it's like, oh, your game has used up the 6 gigs of video memory. Well, we'll just use another 12 or 15 gigs on the hard drive, and it won't impact your performance. That's how fast it is. So the pictures and what they showed when Digital Foundry was going through it was a 1 terabyte drive. It's about the size of a GameCube memory card, a little longer. And it was a 1 terabyte that you popped in the back. And it's like, oh, you want a bigger one? You're going to have, it's from SanDisk. So you're going to pay, if you want a 2 terabyte, it's probably going to cost you $150.
Not surprised. I guess I need to save up for that.
But it'll come with whatever. But this is a way for them to, reduce the cost. Like the base system's probably, they haven't said what the SKUs are, but it's probably going to be a terabyte of that really, really fast hard drive space because it's so optimized. Remember how they said they weren't going to have games as large because commonly used files won't have to be duplicated in multiple folders spread across a hard drive. It can all be in one spot. So a game that was like 75 gigs will be down to like 20 gigs or 30 because of the texture. And also they've developed special compression algorithms for the data. Basically, your games can be, when you download a game, it's compressed and then it would expand to whatever size. They'll be able to read the games in its compressed state on the fly. So they'll be able to shrink the games down more. So you won't need as much, but I mean, somebody like you or I, as a reviewer, will probably need a 2 terabyte. There hasn't been any word on whether or not you can use an external drive with it yet, but I would assume you can't unless it's an NVMe drive, which is for that one slot. But at least that means it's user upgradable, whereas the current generation of Xbox can't at all. Whereas remember before you had different drives you'd slap on the side of your Xbox. Mm-hmm. But now they're literally making it. It literally looks like a GameCube memory card, and you pop it in the back, and it's made out of metal, and it has its own heat sink, and it's part of the cooling solution for it. So because those things can get really friggin' hot. Apparently, they said it's got a substantial weight to the actual memory card too. But so it is confirmed that was not an expansion port. That is the hard drive port. But it also means it's toolless, whereas with the PlayStation systems, you have to use a screwdriver, pull it out, swap out the drive, pop it in. This is literally plug and play. So that's cool, at least. It also means that's why they were able to shrink the system down a lot smaller, because it's not using like a mechanical hard drive, which creates heat on the inside. It's just a little tiny, USB. It's basically like an extra wide USB stick that's a little longer that you can stick in. They confirmed that the size of the actual Xbox Series X is almost identical to if you stacked 2 GameCubes on top of each other.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so it's not that big at all. It looked big in the advertisements, like when they were showing it off, but it's not. It's literally like 2.5 GameCubes tall. So that's cool. The other features they said, remember how they said they were going to have the suspend option where you could suspend a game, go into something else. You could have 2 or 3 games on the fly, and then when you come back, instantly get back to where you were without closing the game or closing your system. Mm-hmm. How that's working is with the dynamic hard drive. They will literally reserve a hard drive space for the entire instance of your game and suspend it, and you can come back. So depending on how large or complex the game is, if you're playing like Gears of War, you might only be able to do 2 games at a time that way, where you can hold it in memory in the hard drive, and it'll depend on the size of your hard drive as well. Now, if you're playing indie titles or titles that are only, let's say, a 4 gig download, you could have like 30 games on the go and just come back to it whenever you want. And when they say instant resume, it's like 1 second and you're in the game and you're exactly where you were in a save state. which is pretty freaking cool. They talked about, remember how they were talking about the dynamic input latency on the controllers?
Mm-hmm.
What they've done is they've developed an algorithm that detects when you press buttons, and it's really complex, but essentially they've lowered the input lag on controllers by a margin of half from what current wireless technology allows. So you'll be almost like using a wired controller, but it's wireless, which is going to be amazing for Twitch gaming, like Call of Duty style, and fighting games, which traditionally Xbox has not been great for fighting games. It's always been the PS4 always had better input lag for fighting games, as you would probably know, right? You prefer fighting games on the PS4. That might be different this generation, depending on what Sony comes up with. The other thing that they said is the system is going to be designed so with certain models of television that can get firmware updates, which would include stuff like the TCL TV that I have that has the Roku player built in with the smart TV. When you switch the system on with the controller, it'll detect what TV you have, and if it's one of the supported models, automatically switch the TV into gaming mode. So you don't even have to fiddle around with your controller, which lowers the input lag.
I like it.
Yes, and so literally, if you have a Sony, they listed a bunch of them, but it includes TVs that are smart TVs with the Roku operating system. So it'll be like, boom, you turn on your TV, and when you're watching a movie on your computer, it's in standard mode, which has all the bells and whistles on, but it's a higher input lag. But when you switch to the input automatically over to your Xbox, it'll go, oh, it's got an Xbox here. Boom, game mode. Now you've got the lowest latency possible. They've also shown off some really amazing stuff. They showed Gears running in 4K 60 FPS, HDR on ultra settings. And it actually was getting performance the same as or beating a $2,000 to $3,000 gaming PC.
Holy shit, that's impressive.
And at the same time, running at half the power and half the heat and noise of what a gaming PC would do. So we're at a point now where this is the first generation since the PS3, and maybe the first generation ever, where their gaming hardware is a generation ahead of what a home computer can do. Because they haven't even, this was running in the engine that was made for the Xbox One and Xbox One X. It had 0 features turned on that were for the next gen console that optimize CPU performance, GPU performance. This was just brute forcing the current engine, meaning you could get probably twice the performance that it's currently getting out of an optimized engine. So we're talking, it can do things potentially that PCs won't be able to do for the next 3 to 5 years. And, they won't say price, but even if it launches at $5.99 American, which would be like $7.99 here, I can understand why, because of the tech they put in here. Remember when the PS3 came out and everybody was balking at it's $500 and some odd dollars, and it was like 800 Canadian? Well, it was a substantial boost to what normal people could do, but it was basically like getting $1,000 gaming PC in a console. This is like getting a $3,000 gaming PC.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out for price, especially given what's happening in the world right now. I mean, they're talking about moving manufacturing out of Asia, potentially over to Mexico. So I don't know. I wonder if this console generation could even get delayed a few months.
Okay, it also says here they confirmed it is a 4K Blu-ray drive in there, so it's a full UHD. So if you were somebody waiting to jump on that bandwagon, you can go ahead. They said they're targeting their performance of 4K 60, or in some cases it'll be 1080p 120 frames per second. So if you can decide, I guess, in some games if you want high frame rate. So because does Call of Duty really matter if it's in 4K? As long as
yes and no.
You know what I mean? Like, would a Call of Duty fan want a 4K 60 experience or a 1080p experience at 120? They probably want the 120 because of the Twitch gaming. Just how fast you can move. Whereas a game, for instance, like a Final Fantasy, you might want to target best visuals first.
Yes.
So that was sort of going through the article, the notes I made here. It is a custom NVMe drive, like I said, that you'll have to buy through them. They haven't announced prices, but there's going to be a few different ones. I'm assuming they probably won't offer anything less than a terabyte. They might, for a budget concerned person, or when they release a Series S or something, they might offer a 500 gig option. But I would suspect that at launch, it comes with a terabyte, and then they'll give you the option to upgrade to a 2, which is probably fine for what it is. But the other thing that they showed here was even games that weren't meant to use HDR or weren't invented to use, like the Halo 5, they showed they actually developed an engine that can take certain titles and add HDR to them after the fact. And it's not as good as if it was, originally created for it, but it didn't actually impact the performance. And they also had all these other features that they weren't even turned on yet because Unreal doesn't have them, working yet. But they got a Xbox version or Xbox One version of Gears, ported it to the Xbox Series X, and had in 2 weeks a version that was performing better and surpassed the original version in quality and stability and visual performance. So literally, they can take certain game engines and pump out a version that's better than the current generation in a 2-week turnaround time, which is kind of amazing. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff on variable frame rates and all that junk, which, I mean, that's not really super duper important. The big things for us are how fast the games can come out for it. So anything in the last year that came out as like a flagship title can easily be ported. And like they could potentially have, like, on day one, they're like, oh, by the way, every title from Xbox that came out in the last year, first party, when you download your copy or install your disc, it automatically has the new version working.
Which, for example, Cyberpunk 2077 has that option.
Exactly.
If you buy a copy today, it'll be upgraded to the newest Xbox version, which is great.
Yeah, so and that's pretty much what the article went into then, and they've got multiple videos now showing teardowns and heat, spectrums on there on the performance. But what I wanted to say was, like, they really showed off. They're trying to wow people, and they're not saying price because I guarantee you it's going to be in the $500 to $750 Canadian range. Based on this, if they said it was $1,000, it wouldn't sell because people would be like, even though it's technically better than like a $2,000 computer, there's a perception that a game console can't be that expensive. So they're probably prepping people to say, hey, it's going to be 5 to 7, or you'll be able to get, they might offer an option where it's like, the lower end Series S or whatever, where it doesn't have a built-in hard drive. It has the option to buy one to expand it, which saves them $100. But they're like, by the way, it doesn't have internal storage, but you can stream everything until you buy external storage, which would be a way to get people on board with their game streaming service. So there's different things they can do, but I have a feeling they're not saying price. They've shown everything because they are going to worry some people when that price drops, which I'm going to be fine with, because if it does everything that they were saying it does, and it's been shown to do so far, it's actually going to be worth it, especially if it's going to be in the 5 to 7 year value prospect.
Agreed. I'm not looking forward to buying this just because it is going to be a significant investment, but it's going to be around for the next 5 to 8 years minimum. So it's an investment. It's going to pay for itself anyway. With all that being said, I don't know much more there really is to say. Definitely, we've said all we could possibly about E3 and the digital future. We're likely looking down the barrel at, and I'm okay with it. It's less travel plans for us, and we get to sit in our underwear and watch E3, such as it will be, in our underwear at home. Very happy for that. New consoles on the horizon, new potential shakeups with other IPs, with certain publishers and developers. We'll have to wait and see. So,
and honestly, the ball's in Sony's court now. They got to do something, because Microsoft has been steadily announcing things, and what they're showing off is very impressive. Sony's going to have to make a video or something that really blows people away, because I think that what Microsoft did now is they're even starting to sway some of the Sony fanboys over.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting console wars ahead as we enter the next round of skirmishes and border fires. So, as always, we do welcome your input on the show. Feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net. We did get an email last week, oddly enough, for an old episode of Future Imperfect, which I didn't get a chance to reply to her. I think her name was Colleen. So, once again, thank you for participating in the show. So, for the prototype, we have been
Alex.
I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd. Say it, live free or die hard. Take care of yourselves over the next little bit as you stay in self-isolation. have some good gaming. And on the next episode of The Prototype, we're going to be talking about what we're playing during self-quarantine. We'll be back next time on The Prototype. And as my friend Jackie Bam Bam might say, be cool, be kind, be careful. We'll catch you again right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Bum, 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 bum,